I'm Sagi Haviv. I'm a partner and designer at Chermayeff Geismar Haviv, which is a graphic design studio based in New York City. I think I've been lucky and fortunate in my journey. First of all, not everybody finds their passion, and just finding what you're good at is a journey in itself. And finding what you're excited to do, to wake up in the morning and do, is a journey in itself. So I think I've been lucky to find what it is that I like to do, and then been given opportunities. I often say I stand on the shoulders of, I have been standing on the shoulders of two giants, Tom Geismar and Ivan Chermayeff. Uh, they're quite tall, men anyway, but I continue to kind of marvel at the opportunity that they gave me and everything that I've learned from them, and I continue to learn from Tom Geismar, who is my partner and I work with every day. It's an honor. Yeah, I mean, you said the word timeless, and I think that's worth just thinking on it for a moment. Is what are we looking for? We are concerned with permanence. As I said, there are many other aspects of a brand and even a visual identity, visual language and color and font and typefaces and visual elements and motion and behavior and all of that. And those things tend to change over time. But the logo, that piece must endure. At least this is how we see it when we come in to do something. The value is in putting in place something, establishing something that never has to change. And for that, the process that you asked about is very important. So we start with conversations. We start with, trying to understand as much as possible about the company or the organization. What is it that makes them different in the market from everybody else? What is that special culture that they've developed? What is the vision for the future? Who are their competitors? Who are their audiences? And so on and so forth. So very important to engage stakeholders right off the bat. We also sometimes conduct research, sometimes market research, if this is a consumer-facing brand, to understand sometimes whether there's equity in the current identity, what are the perceptions, what are the desired perceptions. We review some work that sometimes has been done potentially by others, like positioning, brand strategy, brand architecture work, and so on. And all of this culminates into kind of putting together a set of success criteria. We try to take out the subjectivity. Everybody has ideas and emotions and feelings about what they like, what they don't like. I don't like sharp corners. I like circles. I like blue. I don't like red. All kinds of things that are completely irrelevant. So we try to really think of this as a problem-solving discipline. And for that, we have to define the problem that we're solving. So a set of success criteria that address both functionality, what are we looking for in terms of how does it need to function, and personality, how does it need to feel, what kind of character does it need to project, and so on. So that is kind of the culmination of the audit phase, is with a success criteria that will guide the design phase that is coming next. Then we kind of withdraw, we call it hibernation. We withdraw and conduct design explorations based on the success criteria. We judge them against the success criteria. Those explorations include many, many, many directions, sometimes hundreds of possible design directions. Those we then internally, we narrow them down, we look at them together, we work together, all of us, collaboratively. We don't have separate teams. We have one team, all the principals and the design team. And that's very helpful because, things get better very quickly when you have different opinions and everybody respects each other, even if we disagree sometimes. That's part of the process. And those most promising directions we put into kind of testing in two ways. One is we put them into applications. We want to see how they function in small size, on a business card printed, in a tiny size, in social media avatar, in pixel formats online, in embroidery, in broadcast, in motion. When you cannot have the color, sometimes you have applications that it has to be just a silhouette. That tells us a lot about the design and how successful it will be. And oftentimes we start applying them and then we either toss things out because they don't work as well as we thought, or we change them, we modify them, we optimize them for all these situations. So that's the first way that we vet the designs. We put them into it's like a pressure test, right? The other way that we vet them is that we send them to trademark search. It's a preliminary trademark search. It's in regions and classes, trademark classes that were identified by the client as the most interesting for them, the most of concern for them based on their business. And that preliminary trademark search tells us where there might be concern. And then we may abandon a design direction, we may modify it, and so on. Those two tracks happen at the same time. And that leads to a presentation where we show the most promising designs that also survive the trademark search and that we deem superior functionality-wise. We present them in the context of applications to the client. And that presentation is a big moment in the process, obviously. But oftentimes we would reduce the number of options because you don't want to take to leadership too many options. It's not their forte. That's not their expertise. And oftentimes people get flustered if they see too many options. So our kind of commitment is that even for the first round, we really show only good options, only options that we agree deserve to be seen by the client. And then it's really, usually smooth sailing from there because you have solid options that survive basic preliminary search, and we know work in applications and fulfill all the success criteria. So then it's about choosing from good to best. A point on that, we are not designing for ourselves. We are designing in the service of the client. We oftentimes say we are not artists. There is an artistic aspect to what we do, yes, and we have artistic concerns that maybe the client doesn't have. We want to be excited about an artistic value of something we put out there. It might be, some relationship between positive and negative space, or, some geometric form that we think is exciting and innovative in some way. But ultimately, those designs are tested in how they service the business, how they solve the problem of the clients, not our, an artist comes up with their own problem and then they solve it. We solve problems for clients, and that's the difference. For us, we were just as shocked when first of all, it was shocking what happened, right? Because David Zaslav, who was the head of Discovery Inc., which was a serious company, but much smaller than Warner Media, what he made happen is something very rare, in which a smaller fish swallows a big fish. And that, that is shocking in itself. But also, he's a visionary. He's a true visionary. And when we met with him, he had an idea of what it is that brings together all of the companies, more than 100 brands under that new combined portfolio. And, the sentence that he said to us was, the stuff that dreams are made of, which is a quote from the Maltese Falcon, which is quite old now, said by Humphrey Bogart in the film, which really captures his vision of, we are about creativity, we're about storytelling. And that really differentiates, we just talked about what we try to understand in the first interviews. That's the main thing that we care about, is what differentiates you from everybody else. And in this case, Warner Brothers Discovery, this newly formed company, really one of the big four now, alongside Netflix, Amazon, and Disney, differentiation is difficult because you are so big. And in some way, it feels like, especially now with streaming and everything, everybody's trying to be the same thing. And everybody's trying to be everything to everybody. So how do you really set yourself apart? And for him, there was no question. It was about storytelling. It was about creativity. And, for him, that idea of drawing from the legacy was very, very important. That shield of Warner Brothers that we all grew up seeing on the big screen before, as the lights go out and we're getting ready to dive into a different world, that was non-negotiable for him. And he was very, very strong about it. And we, just being honest, we're not sure at the moment that we walked into this, is this the right direction? How can we not take something from here and something from here? How can we not create something new? We had concerns. One concern was, this is something that is of one portfolio. Would everybody coalesce around that one thing that comes from not only from one portfolio, but from one distinct brand within the portfolio? The second question was, well, this shield, which he distinctly mentioned the 1948 shield, which is, one rendition that's very specific. And when we Googled it and found that rendition, we realized, it was great for the time. But when you put that in today's environment, it has the risk of looking antiquated. The other challenge was maybe a bigger one, was, how do you take this thing that everybody knows and many people love and update it in a way that does not mess with it too much, that does not compromises it too much. And that is something we spent a lot of time thinking about and noodling with. And ultimately, we felt that we need to keep the proportions of that shield. We peeled off the three-dimensional treatment. We peeled off the shading. We also redrew the letter forms because, interestingly, that shield, is not completely friendly to both letter forms. The W is quite a wide letter form, but the B has this absence there on the top right that we really wanted to fill because, we really wanted to achieve balance there as much as possible. So we redrew the B in a way that also echoes, a little bit the strokes of the W, but really kind of tries to fill in that space. And it's important to remember that we're not designing letters for readability. This is not a typeface that is meant to be read. This is a mark. And I think for us, that was something that gave us a liberty and freedom to really do right by the mark and achieve as much balance as possible for the mark. finally, and maybe most importantly, what we did is we equalized the weight of the stroke between the letter forms and the shield. That is what brought them together as one mark, established kind of the rules for that symbol. And, that's what creates harmony. And that's also kind of what makes it look less antiquated and more modern. The one thing we thought from the beginning is that symbol, that WB that we created, should be used small with a big name. As I said, that idea of a jewel that is there. This is not a consumer-facing brand. It's really about the name. And when we set to design the name and the lettering, those pointy moments in the symbol really inspired that typographic treatment. This name has 4 R's, so we kick the R a little further out to have that pointy moment. And then, pointy moments in the A, in the N, and even in the round letters, like the C and the S. All of those got accentuated sharp points to resonate with the sharp points in the shield. Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned the word trend. I mean, we really try to avoid trends and actually consciously try to ignore trends. And that's not because it's not interesting to see what's happening in the world of graphic design at the moment, but because, again, as I said before, we are concerned with permanence. So anything that's trendy now will be, passé tomorrow. Anything that's hot right now is cold, in a week. So we are very careful to really try to really think about these things in a much kind of longer time frame. And for that, I can say, I have to give credit, Tom and Ivan, who started the office in 1957, they, this idea of, creating something simple, reducing something to its essence, was something that they pioneered back then, before there was any, talk of the word brand wasn't even invented, I don't think. So that idea of, focusing on the silhouette and really driving to something that's highly reductive, very, very simple, so that at the time it needed to work in limited production methods like halftone screen printing and black and white newspapers and, three-dimensional signs on the side of buildings. Now the same approach that didn't change at all. I can tell you that we work in the same way that they worked back then. We use pencil, we sketch in black and white, in small size, and only when we find that silhouette that excites us, that we think would work, that works in that tiny size on a tiny piece of paper, that's when we translate it into a vector, and then it goes in. But those simple silhouettes are exactly what now thrives in, social media, in apps, and online, and any pixel format, and in 3D, in VR, in AR, in animation, and everything else that's coming. We don't know what else is coming. I mean, if you had told Tom Geismar in 1960, when he designed the Chase Bank logo, that it will be a perfect app icon, he wouldn't even know what you're talking about. And yet it all works. And, until proven otherwise, we are strong believers in simplicity. That's what works best. Yes, the answer is no. And I think it's very important for designers out there to really focus on the work and don't worry so much about what people would say. I think that, what we learned very early on is that it doesn't matter what people think right away. Reactions and comments and all that is completely meaningless. I'm going back to our concern. Our main concern is permanence. So do we care what somebody says about it, on social media the first day it comes out? Or, people will always have things to say. And, sometimes we can also learn from things that people say. It's not that we know everything. But I think when we work on something, we really focus, we keep our heads down and we focus on what the client needs, what we know to be the properties of a good identity, and learning from the client about their business and their vision. Because those two things, our expertise in identity design and the client's expertise in their business, that combination assures that we'll come out with something good. We feel that, being too lost in, what this person is saying and what that person is saying is a distraction. And, you can see examples all around of brands that launched, Airbnb, which was not done by us, created the symbol, launched it. There was a whole uproar and people made fun of it and all of that. But in the long run, it didn't have any issue. And in fact, I would argue that the uproar made the new design famous quicker. So, created equity on an accelerated pace, which was good for the brand. Just want to know, it doesn't mean that we don't conduct consumer research, in the beginning to understand, people's feelings about the brand, people's preferences and so on. And it doesn't mean that we don't have all kinds of advice for clients about how best to launch a logo. I mean, the way a logo is introduced is very important. It's a PR opportunity for the brand. It's an opportunity for the brand to express who they are, where they're going, their vision for the future, and so on, positioning itself. So that moment of launching a new identity is an important moment, and nobody takes it lightly. But when we are working to develop that new mark, we are not concerned with what somebody might say in a social media post. We're concerned with furnishing the brand with the best solution possible for the long term. I think, we try to avoid thinking about our own style or our own preferences or our own sensibilities, because, as I said, we work in the service of a client. However, we do have an approach, and we touched on it a little bit. We're trying to do something that is simple, uncomplicated in form, because we know that will function the best. We know that a simple silhouette will work the best in any application, reproduced in any production method, in animation, in 3D, and any other platform that's coming next. So that is an approach. When you look at our designs all up on one wall, would you think that they have something in common? Perhaps, because they are all kind of simple, right? Simple silhouettes. But that's because of functionality. That's because of the demands of kind of, they need to work. The client needs to be able to leverage it. A logo is a vehicle for the brand. And the vehicle has to be able to go and go fast. And they have to be able to put it on anything. People use the term slap-on logo sometimes as something negative. We think of it as a great advantage. If you can take your logo that we furnish you with and put it on anything, on any background, in any context, in any production method, in physical, in digital, and it would always work, indestructible, foolproof, ironclad, that is success, because we don't know who's going to take it and have to apply it. A lot of brands have to turn over their logos to sponsors, to this, to use in their own materials. Sometimes the guidelines cannot travel with it. Sometimes people ignore the guidelines. So the simplest you can make the mark, that's going to ensure that it works everywhere. And why do we want it to work? Because we want it to appear consistently and the same everywhere people see it. That's how it builds equity. So we're looking for something simple, we're looking for something distinctive, and we're looking for something that has the right personality that's appropriate to the brand now and in the long term. I actually don't know the future, but it's funny working with, two guys, Ivan and Tom, who started something. It's one thing to do this where you have people to learn from, where you have mentors and teachers and things to base everything you're doing on. It's a whole other thing to start something where there was nothing there before. And Ivan and Tom really did that. I mean, there were others, Paul Rand, Solbass, others that kind of got onto this idea of really doing something simple that over time can take on the meaning of the brand that it represents. I think it's been working for a long time, and I imagine it's going to continue to work. If we have to make adjustments, we will. We're agile, and we try to be innovative within kind of the parameters of what would work for the client. For example, there has been a trend of identities that keep changing, and we, at least from where we're looking, we are looking for something consistent rather than something that changes, because we feel that builds the most equity for the client when people see it and see it consistently so they can recognize it. And oftentimes, most brands don't have the exposure to vary their identity every once in a while and still hope that more and more people will recognize it. So, we really try to keep our eye on the ball here and do right by the client and their business or their organization. And that means we work within certain parameters that we find work successfully.